Hello, everybody. Welcome to Open Range. You may notice you have a new host in the driver's seat today. My name is Zach Raknerud. I'm filling in for Pat Hart today on the Dem-NPL segment of Open Range. I am a born and raised North Dakotan. I have lived in Minot now for 10 years, and I myself am a candidate for the District 5 House of Representatives in South Minot, basically Walmart to Oak Park if you're in Minot. I'm excited today to be joined by a couple candidates. And before we get started, just in case you're kind of new to Open Range in this new format, we do now have a weekly segment for the Dem-NPL side, which I think is just wonderful. And I want to talk a little bit about how I think that really fits into North Dakota values, because as much as North Dakota has been dominated by one political party as of late, there has been a lot of policy in North Dakota that is ideologically across the spectrum. And I think that's something that's made North Dakota a really good place to live. Some examples throughout our history is that our K through 12 education system, we mandate in our state constitution that we must adequately fund that. And that has really made our state, as rural as it is, and as many districts that we have across the state that are hyper rural, frontier is what they call it. We have great public education across this state. And through our history, we've made the strides to adequately fund it. And it's really only the last 10 years that we've started to see a bit of a rescission in that. In the past, North Dakota's teachers have ranked 24th paid in the nation, not many years ago, despite the fact that our population's ballpark like 48th in the country. It's because in North Dakota, we understand how important it is to fund things like public education. And I really hope that we can get back to something like that. Additionally, we have revolutionized human services in North Dakota. That's another piece where we're constitutionally mandated to fund it. And there's really rich history there. Despite being such a rural state, we've had several human service zones that were created by Governor Guy back in the 1970s that have been huge institutions for us, where we take care of mental health in this state. We have made sure to make the investments where that's needed. Unfortunately, again, though, that's something we're starting to lose track of. And so I think it's really important that we have discussions from this perspective, because it's very part and parcel for North Dakota's history. And so I would encourage you, as we get closer to November, there's a lot of Dem-NPL candidates across the ballot. Take a look at every single one as an individual. There are a lot of really good ideas out there that will help make North Dakota really good. And statewide candidates too. We live in divisive times. There's no doubt about that. But I really hope that you can listen to our conversations today and really consider all of us as human beings, members of your community, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, and that we can have really good discussions that make North Dakota a better place to live. So join us, and we're going to have a lot of fun today. With that, I'm going to introduce a couple of our guests today. I'll start with right next to me. We have State Senator Ryan Braunberger out of District 10, who is now a candidate for North Dakota Secretary of State. So Ryan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Zach, for having me on today. Like I said, I'm current state senator in District 10, which, if you know Fargo, it's like the West Acres Shields Arena area of Fargo. I have been in that office since 2022. Now I am currently in the middle of my second term, so which actually doesn't expire until 2028, but I am running for Secretary of State. Basically, I'm running for that office to ensure that we can protect people's rights to votes, protect especially our rural voters, so that they can continue to mail in ballots, and continue to do my job and work on that.
Okay, awesome. And now also with us today, we have across the table District 3 House candidate Michael Thiesen and current mayor of Surrey, North Dakota.
Senate candidate,
sorry.
Hi, I'm Mike Thiesen. I live in Surrey, North Dakota. I'm running for Senate in District 3. That's District 3 runs from probably one of the most diverse districts we have in the state. I have downtown Minot, the small town of Surrey, the small town of Logan, and a ridiculous amount of farmland in between. We got 4 different school districts. So there isn't really it's a whole lot of everything in my district. So
fair enough. So Mike, when it comes to your decision to run and you look at what's been going on in North Dakota the last few years in the political landscape and your service in local government, what are the primary things you want to see changed when it comes to the state legislature?
You're going big right away. Okay. One of the main things that drives me, it very frustrates me when it comes to in my district, my current legislative candidates, or representatives, being in the administration of a small community and being mayor, being council before that, we've had the lack of communication that we have between like a city township level with the state it's lacking, for lack of a better term. There is no back and forth. We are kind of left to fend for ourselves. We do a lot of work with the League of Cities has become our stopgap for any questions that we have, because we can't get a hold of our legislators to help us figure out what the problems are. Or we reach out to the Secretary of State if we can, and having people in roles like that actually communicate with us would be fantastic. That's one of the main reasons that drove me to want to step up above mayor. So,
got it. Thank you. So Ryan, same kind of question to you. When you look at North Dakota the last few years, your public service, making the decision to run for Secretary of State, what's your motivations there? What would you like to kind of see from the office, and what motivates you the most there?
Well, and I think to Mike's point exactly is we need to have an office that is more a bit available to our community members. I think that's the biggest thing. And that's what I'm hearing on the campaign trail, is there's a lot of frustration out there of not being heard by their representation in there. And that it's in a lot of different things. I think we need to have somebody in that office that is going to look beyond their party values, because I think we need somebody because as far as I'm concerned, that office should be a nonpartisan office, because it's the basics of that office is to run our elections, to file all the proclamations and bills and just be a repository for the government of North Dakota, and to make sure that businesses are licensed the way they're supposed to be and make sure they're filing their things. That really should never be a partisan thing. So I think that is my big push for this office, is that I want to make sure that we can build on what is already there, because I think there has been some great things that I've done with that office, but also make sure that we continue to move forward, make sure that we don't reduce as many barriers as possible to that office, so that we can make sure that we're out there and that we're out there educating people on what they need to run a business in North Dakota, make sure that they know what it takes to vote in North Dakota, and just be out there in the communities. And that's the main purpose for me running.
it's hard to do that when you don't have any communication from one side to the other,
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So I led this segment by talking about two big priorities that are in the state constitution: K through 12 funding and health and human services. Mike, you have an idea that kind of ties into that a bit. And so I was wondering if we could chat a little bit about that, about practices in the past of the state legislature regarding those two mandates, and maybe some changes you'd like to see.
It's not really an idea. It's kind of like a wish list type thing. If K through 12 and the HHS bills, budget bills, are the two largest required spending pieces by the state. And a lot of times in the past, we have had those bills have come down to the wire at the end of the session last day. And things tend to get cut out of the bills because they don't have the money for them after everything else has gone through. It doesn't always happen, but it has happened in the past. I would like to encourage the legislature to get those bills on the floor and passed by the halfway point. I think that would be a productive way of showing the state that we value those priorities in our state, whether it be all our HHS funding and our K through 12 programs. By putting them first before anything else, it shows that we care about those things.
Yeah, and we've seen that the opposite's been kind of happening in recent sessions, where we're scrambling at the very end. I think that's
pretty common, though.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
It is. I mean, it is. It's pretty common to scramble to make sure that we have, because we also have budget updates throughout the session, because we also have to make sure that, because obviously the budget goes through July and we're still and so we're trying to figure out what we're going to have and what our kind of forecasts and everything like that. I know in the next legislative session, our governor is in our regular session, not the special session, the regular session, our governor has already wanted cuts in all of our departments, because we are looking to have to do that, because our budget is, even I've looked at our budget numbers and where we forecast, we are coming in lower than what we forecast, even with some of the oil prices that have come in. We're still a little behind in forecasting. We forecasted lower. So that's going to be tough decisions. And you're right that the biggest thing we need to do in the legislature is reprioritize where we're spending that money, because we are spending it too much on special interests to bring in businesses to North Dakota, even though we don't necessarily have the staff for everybody, but we're not prioritizing on the people themselves.
And as our budgets get tighter, we need to make sure that those things are funded.
Correct. Yep.
All these things are really huge priorities for the state of North Dakota. So through our discussion today, we're going to be having a lot of talks about different issues that are going to be very important for the state. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to be chatting about the special session that is going to be coming up, potential other bills that might be coming into play. And then from there, we'll have some discussions on housing policy and then potentially some ballot measures. So I hope that you will join us on the other side, and thanks for tuning in. Welcome back to Open Range. I am your guest host today, Zach Raknerud, filling in for Patrick Hart. I'm pleased to be joined by a couple great guests today. And our next segment, we are going to be talking about the special session that was called by Governor Armstrong. So if you haven't seen the news, Governor Armstrong did call a special session for the reason of regulating the controlled substance of kratom in North Dakota. First, an executive order was issued to ban its sale effective August 5th. And now that the legislature will be coming in to special session in order to deal with the regulatory necessities that need to be codified into law in order to make that executive order fully law. So today with us, we do have a current state senator, Ryan Braunberger. And Brian, would you just want to kind of walk us through the mechanisms of this special session and kind of what we should expect to see and your thoughts?
Sure. So when a special session is called, we usually get a directive from the governor, or if we decide to do it, because it can go either way, because we can also come in, but we have to use our days if we decide to go in versus the governor. The minimum of special session can be is 3 days, because constitutionally that's what we have to have, because we have to have notices going out when we're going to debate bills, stuff like that. So we can't go any less than 3 days. Right now, legislative management will be meeting next week to determine what bills will be debated during that. Obviously, kratom is probably the big one that will be debated. We also have probably some military museum will probably be another one. And then we also have some other people that will be presenting some bills. I've heard anything from some data center discussions, possibly some childcare discussions, and possibly school meal discussion as well, as what I've heard that's going around. None of that is official, but I've heard that's kind of what we're doing, and we'll be deciding that what will be officially out there on Monday the 17th.
Sure.
So,
and there's a committee of lawmakers essentially that are part of legislative management. And
correct.
Is it like an up-down majority vote as far as what bills will make it to that 3-day session?
It is, yes. So it is they will determine that. This is different from a regular session, because regular session, everybody is able to submit whatever they want, and it basically gets a hearing, where in the special session there's more controls, because obviously we are limited to time and we don't want 150 bills. We can't do 150 bills in 3 days. It's just ridiculous. We can barely do 1,100 bills in 80 days, but we still managed to do it. So yeah, and that will control that. It'll be strictly controlled that way.
Makes sense. So Mike, as an active candidate for the Senate, do you have any thoughts just kind of on the special session itself regarding, like, obviously you do have an active state senator in your district. So anything you want to see from him, or just lawmakers in general?
I actually have a question about I want some clarity on the kratom issue. If you have a second. With the governor's directive, if I understand correctly, it was it's a two-part issue from what I understand. It's the synthetic kratom and the regular kratom, correct?
Correct.
The issue, from what I understand, is the synthetic kratom is tending to have stuff in it that's not labeled properly.
Well, it's largely unregulated.
Both of them are unregulated without a doubt.
So we don't really know what's in it, and I think the need to regulate it is very important.
Mhm.
So during the last legislative session, there was a bill that to ban it on the House side that actually got turned into a study
Okay.
that was an option for us, that did pass and was an option for us to study in the interim. We did not pick that up because wedge management also determines what bills get studied or what studies get onto the agenda. That never got picked up for studies. So we didn't even study what it is. So we don't really understand. Most legislators have never heard of kratom until now, basically.
So from what I understand, and I know this went through, I think it was almost a decade ago, it went through the U.S. legislature on whether to regulate it, and they kind of left it alone. There was a lot of hubbub in D.C. about this. But the main thing is that since then, the original kratom is just a palm leaf they grind up, and it's like a bit of a pain reliever. Okay, but the synthetic kratom is like where they're having the majority of the issues. And I'm all for regulating kratom because it is kind of an unknown, which I have no problem with that. But I was wondering if you were aware of the differences in the two focuses.
Well, one thing I can just jump in quick, Ryan, too, is I go to gas stations for work across the Williston and Wofford City area.
And that is where it is all sold.
That is a ton of it, man. I'll tell you, they were shoveling out boxes upon boxes of that stuff. And so it's packaged in what looks like a 5-hour energy container. That's where most of it is coming from. There has been a lot of talk about the gas station platforms that have like pills and stuff. That's certainly an issue. But when it comes to volume, it's like that liquid stuff that you could just buy at gas stations as much as you want. And that's where you'll see the 7-OH. That's the synthetic piece that they're looking for as far as differentiating between synthetic kratom and regular kratom. Because I'll say, like, I'm totally with you that like we need regulation on that 7-OH stuff, because it's the amount of stuff that was moving, and people don't know a lot of the time that how potent that stuff can be, and then frankly how dangerous it can be. So like when you separate out, though, when it comes to the natural stuff, the concern that I would have is that, you know, kratom is a substance that interacts with opioid receptors, especially at a certain dose. And so, you know, we do have an opioid use problem in the state overall. And so I guess my concern is that kratom has typically been an imperfect but step in the right direction for people who are using really hard opiate substances. And so it's something to keep in mind as far as if we're going to rip this thing out from underneath, like what are we going to do to support those who are in active addiction?
So I think, so to answer your question about I think there's going to be a couple different bills that are going to go through depending on where it's at, because I think there's going to be a health and human services aspect of it, and then also a judiciary aspect of it, because obviously we want it, there's going to probably be a push to criminalize users, which I'm against, because I think criminalizing users is not the right way to go, because it also creates many other problems out there within our judicial system. So we will, and I think we will be looking at separating out the natural versus the 7-OH. I am fully for that. We need to restrict it to that sale needs to be restricted to similarity to what we do for recreational marijuana or for medicinal marijuana, where it's more in more controlled environments, those types of things. And before that, and that's the other part, is I wish we would have done the study, because then we could actually find out what are the things that are necessary, because there are good things about kratom as well, because it does help people with chronic pain. It does help with opioid, but there is some debate on the opioid aspect too, because are we just allowing it to be a trade-off from one drug to another and not actually
it
doing
feels
that?
like a trade-off.
Yeah, but we also have that with our methadone clinics too.
That is true.
So we do that, and that happens as well. So we're going to have to spend probably, it's not going to be perfect, and we're going to be revisiting this kratom for probably next session and probably beyond, because it's going to have to be continuously adjusted.
I think that's an important piece, because it's only 3 days, right? So capacity becomes an
minimum
issue.
3 days.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Minimum 3. I think we're going to push it through in 3, because we don't, I realize that all of us are also, not all of us all have other jobs as well. So we're going to push it through, and it's also a harvest season, and we're a lot of farmers.
Yes.
So a lot of farmers are not happy that we're having to go back in, because they're in the middle of trying to harvest whatever they can at this time too. So So we'll push it through, but we're going to probably make some bad decisions. I'll tell you that, because it's just, we're going to be doing it in a right way, and that's in a rush. We've already kind of, I think the governor just outright banning it is a little too far, just because we don't have a way for people to get the resources that are necessary, and there's not enough guidance for our addiction resources out there to make sure that we can help people with withdrawals and stuff like that. So I think we need to look at it more holistically, and not just we're going to ban this and then move on.
And the having at least a partial study would have been very, very helpful right now. So,
I mean, there is a working group that's working on it right now.
oh, there is. Okay.
There is. So that is happening. I think they're actually meeting today, probably right now or pretty soon on it. So that's been doing. Unfortunately, no Dem-NPLer is on that. It's only Republicans that are on that. So
Okay.
we can view that, but we're not on those committees. So
Makes sense. So with the special session and kind of the mechanisms that you talked before, it sounds like there's a strong possibility some other bills could make it to the floor. There's been talk of things like a data center bill, potentially bringing back school meals, like you mentioned. If you were to, like, obviously you don't have like you're not able to predict the future, but if you were to kind of guess, like, is there certain issues that you think ledge management will bring up this special session aside from the Kratom issue?
I think, well, the military museum, I think, is going to be not the topic. I think the data center is going to be interesting. I think with the data center stuff, though, I think there is some bipartisan people that want to see something happen with that, because that is a big issue. So I can see that it either will be pushed through or won't make it through, and then it's going to become a whole different issue. But yeah, it's really hard to say on what we'll do. I know we're not going to be, I will tell you this, we're not going to be constrained by the governor, because we're the legislative branch, and we make our own decisions, even if he's calling it. So
Checks and balances.
Yep.
One thing that I will say on the data center issue is I'm in construction. I have been pretty much my whole life, whether different aspects of it. Business moves very, very fast, and government moves very slow. And I think that is the biggest problem we're having right now with data centers across the state, is that we're having discussions in our communities about data centers, and we're trying to figure out what we want to do, whether we want them or not. But businesses, they need to move. And I wish they could slow down a little bit. It would make things a lot easier.
I agree. And here's the thing is, we're not the only state that's discussing this.
Oh, you are not wrong there.
Texas has just started putting more restrictions on it, because they're looking at their power grid as being a problem.
Their grid is already a problem as it is.
I serve on energy in the interim, and the last two interims that we have did, MISO and SPP, have both said that we are looking at a potential cliff in our energy resources. So we need to really take that really seriously.
This is where that slow down a little bit and have the discussion would help. We could just do buy-ins into our grid. It would alleviate a lot of the problems.
Right.
And I'm not saying that solves all the problems, but it's one step towards trying to make it a partnership instead of the communities feeling like they're being strong-armed.
Yeah, and I'll say with the grid operators, this was a lot of these discussions were before data centers were even coming online.
All of these things are going to be really fascinating to see how they shape up in the special session. And so join us on the flip side of Open Range. We're going to have some more conversation about potential future sessions with housing policy on the other side. We'll see you there. Hello, welcome back to Open Range. My name is Zach Raknerud, guest hosting today for Pat Hart, and joined by a couple awesome guests today. And this next segment, we're going to be chatting about housing policy, which impacts a lot of our lives in so many ways, whether you rent your home or whether you own your home. Housing policy impacts all of our lives and is a huge part of our economic realities every day. And thankfully, we have with us today District 3 Senate candidate Michael Thiesen, who not only has local government experience, but is a tradesman as well. So Mike, you want to talk with us a little bit about housing policy? What kind of stuff do you see that would make life better in North Dakota in that way?
More inventory. That is really what it boils down to, is we don't have the houses for people to live in. We see a lot of, like, as you and I were discussing earlier today, North Dakota has just become a majority renting state. Mm-hmm. But like you had mentioned, Fargo has been for quite a while.
Right.
Like, and it's not a bad thing to rent, but in where I come from, in my corner of the neck of the woods up in the Minot, Surrey area, we owning a home is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like that dream of owning a home. Mm-hmm. And the problem I see though is that we just have a lack of inventory, and trying to get developers to come into the state, whether it be local or even out of state, it's hard, because the number one thing when it comes to a development would be where more than, what I mean by development is like more than like 1 or 2 houses, right? You have to build out roads, infrastructure, and then you get your housing, your plots ready, then you have to put your houses up, and that all of that comes with a lot of money and a lot of risk.
Right.
Okay. And I have this cockamamie idea to split the two, whether it be to separate the two. You do a push for development and you separate that completely from the build out of the house. And then you come in secondly with a separate program that would encourage building and building of a, what contractors do specifically in my area is it is more cost effective for them to build a $500,000 home, custom home, and they can build 3 to 5 of those a year and make a very good living. Smaller business, no big deal. To build a more cost effective home, that what I would call an attainable house, anywhere from $225,000 to $300,000 is, it's a harder sell because your margins get so much smaller. So the only way that I can figure out to encourage that would be to take a little bit of the risk away and to make it so I can, instead of building 5 small homes, I can build 10 small homes. That would close the gap on profits for that business, because they can throw up 10 instead of 5 and still make the same amount of money in the same amount of time.
So can I ask you a question about Surrey?
Yes.
And how does zoning work in Surrey?
As in
For zoning for development, so you guys, because we also got a lot of that stuff is local control, some of that, because they're the ones that do all the zoning. So how do you guys approach zoning in Surrey, or do you approach any kind of zoning?
We have zoning, but like, I guess I don't understand. We have residential and we have commercial and we have industrial. Okay, those are our 3. We have a development on the north end of our town. That we started. There were some. It didn't do well. And it is currently stalled. So this is my impetus for trying to find a way to encourage that. They have a lot of land set aside for that. And it's ripe.
So is it mostly single family?
It is mostly single family. I have no problem with twin homes. There was a section in that build out that would have been twin homes and an apartment complex section as well.
So I guess what I'm asking is, do you have strict covenants on what can be built on those lands? Because like between single versus, mostly residential, be single versus multifamily.
They
you have
whatever. Be either.
Okay. So I think one of the biggest things that I hear from talking with leaders all over the country is that what they're finding that's working in like Austin and Minneapolis is that they're starting to loosen some of those regulations so that you can't, because they're often stricter than probably Surrey is, where you can't have a multifamily in this. You can only have single family here. You can only have this here and that sort of thing.
Down the street from my house, like the opposite side of my street, 3 houses down, there is a row of twin homes. Like right in the middle of my community. We don't have that. So what you're asking, there's no stipulation.
So there's some of that. So that's one of the things that what we need to also look at is because on how strict those zoning is. And obviously you're going to have some NIMBY, not in my backyard type of pushback. So you have to work with that. The other thing that I always talk about is that we need to create a ladder. We need to have starters, we need to have middle, we need to have high end, because we need to make sure that people, because one of the things they found in Austin, Texas was that once they started building high end stuff, they found that people were now moving from that could afford to, were now moving from middle to high, which was then the people that were the low end are mid to there. So we need a full spectrum of it, because so that people can have mobility. Because the other issue is, I was at a meeting down in Hinkinson with a guy that studies rural housing with the University of Minnesota, and what they're seeing is that small towns are shrinking in population, but not in households. So that there's still the same number of households in those communities, but it's just that the parents are now empty nesters. They're not selling those homes because either they don't have a place to go, they don't want to go, whatever. So we need to make sure that they have somewhere to go so that somebody new can move into those communities and grow families. And that's where we need a full ladder. So and that's where that aspect has to be. Now, rural North Dakota is a lot different than, say, Fargo, because we have more diversity in what we can do. For that, and we and you can also buy a house a lot cheaper in rural North Dakota than you can in Fargo anyway.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, I've heard some of the prices that some of the houses are being sold in some of the rural communities, and I'm like, that's a lot cheaper than what is Fargo. But I'm sure it depends on the community too.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing that I will say that I haven't specifically noticed is we're having a lot of that. You're talking about the upward mobility with the ladder. The people that are moving from that mid to that high end are not selling their middle one. They are keeping it as a rental property, or they are just hanging on to it. And that's where that gap has seemed to have fallen apart.
Yeah, there's some of that, and that has to do with some of that's interest rates. But I think there is going to come to a point where I don't see interest rates ever going back to where it was before.
No,
it'll never go back to that. I think we're probably going to have a 4 to 6% interest rate probably for the time in the near future. So eventually something's going to have to happen.
If we were to get to 4, it would spur home buying like you wouldn't believe.
I don't think we're there. And that's the other part.
We're not.
And I think the part of the issue is there's too many other options for people to be able to do things like rentals, like Airbnbs. So we need to really look at some of those regulations and how those are done. So that we can try to encourage people to offload those properties to make sure that they can get in there.
And even if we could find a way to offload people that are using Airbnbs as an income source, which I applaud them for that. That is a giant undertaking to do that on your own. But that is also that middle market that people have been wanting to move into for the last decade, and they just can't.
Yeah. And Mike, you had hit on the theme of risk that I kind of wanted to touch on a bit when it comes to the idea of developing housing and to shore up inventory and get additional inventory out there. I was talking to another tradesman in the Minot area, and what he kind of proposed is to use the tools that we have in North Dakota to maybe mitigate some of that risk, a la the Bank of North Dakota. Essentially, having the bank in areas like it does with small business to make investments in projects themselves that maybe alleviate some of that risk for investors, especially as material costs are continuing to rise with tariffs, continuing to rise with just overall inflation. So what do y'all think of that? Is there an avenue there where maybe the state could play a role?
If we were to use like a recirculating loan process where a one-time investment from the state into the Bank of North Dakota to allow, this is just the development side of it too, by the way, to develop out areas and land. And then as those lots are sold, that money goes back into the pool. So like a one-time investment from the state after the course of a decade could like triple or quadruple the investment into infrastructure in the state. But it is a long, slow process. And to get the wheels rolling on it, I think a system like that, if we could find the right wording and encouragement to builders or developers, land developers, it would pay for itself over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we should be leveraging the Bank of North Dakota. We leverage the Bank of North Dakota to bring in fertilizer plants, to build pipelines. We do this all the time, and we do this for those type of things. And again, I think I mentioned earlier, it's about prioritization.
Yes,
we need to we really need to think on how we prioritize and where we're spending our money in the state of North Dakota, and we need to focus more on what can help everyday North Dakotans and not just the large out-of-state corporations. I think that's a big thing.
Which is why we should make sure that the HHS bill and the K through 12 bill get paid first before we do anything else.
Correct. So I mean that's what we need to do. We really need to stop North Dakota. Here's the thing: if businesses will move into the state, but we have to have that infrastructure developed in order for them to move into the state.
Correct. And that's the hard lift sometimes.
So instead of us giving loans to those businesses to move to the state, let's give it to the developers, because that way we can get that infrastructure there so that because the part of the problem is that these people are moving into these cities, but then there's no housing for those people to bring their employees. So if we can build those houses, we can have places for people to live. It will encourage those businesses to come forward, as long as they're not greedy. But a lot of corporations are greedy.
Yeah.
So
you can have all the jobs you want in the state, but if everybody's got nowhere to live, you ain't gonna fill those jobs.
Yep.
So great discussion, y'all. I appreciate it. I think that it's pretty clear that housing policy means a lot to people, and there's a lot of things that we can do in North Dakota. And kind of tying back to that idea that it's part and parcel for North Dakota's history, whether it's left or right on the ideological spectrum. We're here to have the discussion and to bring a better future for North Dakota. So we'll catch you on the flip side of Open Range to have more talk about our future. Thanks for joining.
I don't think there's any government in the world.
Welcome back to Open Range. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Zach Raknerud, a District 5 House candidate down in Minot and guest host today, filling in for Patrick Hart. We led the show today by kind of talking about the opportunity that we've had here on Beck TV in order to have a spot every week to talk about kind of the Dem-NPL perspective, maybe a little bit more left of center perspective than giving this that chance. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you to Beck TV and thank you to Gary Emineth specifically for this opportunity. We appreciate the chance to come on and talk to North Dakotans, and I hope that these are discussions that you found valuable. And so this last segment, we're going to kind of wrap up talking about some of the stuff that is going to be happening in the future, heading it towards November. One of those is a ballot measure that's coming through that is going to potentially limit constitutional measures. And doing so, it's looking to create a 60% vote threshold in order to have those constitutional amendments passed. And so I wanted to get some thoughts from Senator Ryan Braunberger just on that measure. I believe it's measure 1 on the ballot. Can you kind of walk us through maybe what got us here and maybe just your thoughts overall?
So as Secretary of State, I'm going to keep this very neutral because I don't want for running for that office. I think that office needs to be neutral on any of these things. So I don't think that office should be projecting what they feel one way or another. I think that's the sole purpose of that office, is just to give information. The 60% ballot measure basically is going to restrict that in order for a constitutional measure to get into North Dakota's constitution, you'd have to get 60% of the vote. Now, there are people in legislature that believes that we need to restrict that because our constitution is too easily manipulated. And they also feel that it could be too easily manipulated by out-of-staters. So that's kind of why it's being done at that point. And that's really why it's getting on the ballots, because we feel that there are people that feel that it needs to be more restrictive. And kind of more, and some of it's also kind of about the U.S. Constitution, because the U.S. Constitution is very restrictive on how you can amend that. So we're trying to do that. We also have probably one of the largest constitutions in the country because we do have the initiated measure, which not every state does.
Sure. So with us as well is Michael Thiesen, running in District 3 Senate, and you are running for a partisan office. So when it comes to measure 1, and you've probably heard about some of the things that got us to this point and why it's coming onto the ballot. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to pivot.
Okay.
I am from a small community, and we're the 60-40 vote threshold of how much of it can be a cumbersome thing to overcome. Okay. We had a school bond measure that just came up, which is currently a 60-40 issue. And we missed it by 5 votes. And it was not it was not for some grand school expansion. We have 10 classrooms that are in portables we're supposed to be there for 3 years. They've been there for over a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And they're crumbling. Fire marshal said these aren't safe for kids anymore. So we need to do something about it. Because the bond measure failed by, again, 5 votes, we had to shave off all of our school sports programs, whether it be basketball, football, track, volleyball. Everything got shaved off by 15% so we could start doing what we could to bring it back up to fire code.
Okay.
Now it is going to be back on the ballot measure. The bond issues will be back on the ballot in November. I have been encouraging people to go vote again to try and do it. It would be. Do you know why they set the threshold at 60% for school bond measures?
Oh, I don't. No, that's a good question.
I would personally like to see it back at 50.
Yeah.
Simple majority.
Less simple, less serious than the Constitution itself.
I think, I don't know the reason behind that because I wasn't around when that was determined. I think that it's probably a similar type of ideology, is that since it is like costing a lot of taxpayer dollars, they're trying to protect how that taxpayer dollars are spent.
Okay.
I would assume that is, but again, I wasn't there when any of that. I don't know I don't know.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, sir.
But I think that's the idea, because obviously, because we need to be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars as best we can.
Yes.
We're not always good stewards of our taxpayer dollars.
Fair enough.
But that's kind of, I think, where that comes into play. I do think we need to really look at those types of issues, because you're not the only school district that has those types of issues.
Bismarck just had the same issue.
And I'm talking, there's other rural school districts that their buildings that should be condemned that are still used. Correct. Because they can't get a bond measure passed. And as a state, we need to do a better job of trying to help those districts to bring them up to that point.
Maintenance is a huge issue for small rural school districts. Like, speaking from personal experience, it is a gigantic lift for a community as a whole.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think it gets down to the issue of people maybe don't feel that government can even work for them if we're continually running up against this wall where we're having to hit this 60% threshold, because like you said, schools falling apart is a serious issue. Like when people think about can government deliver for me, I mean, having a good public school is a big thing for that.
I've leaned into what the actual dollar number is for deferred maintenance we have in the state. And the numbers are breathtaking, and there is no total number for the whole state. There's just little areas of the state you can go, but we're talking like hundreds of millions of dollars in corners of the state.
Yeah. There's a big thing that I've always said when I've been campaigning for these seats, and that's sometimes when you choose not to spend money, it ends up costing you more money. And I think that's something that can be an uncomfortable reality.
That has been the trick with everything from schools to road repair in small communities to sewer and water repair in small communities. You always just another couple of years will be okay.
Yeah, even in Minot, we've just continuously repaired this ladder truck that we have, and if we would have bought it new back in the day, I mean, it would have saved us.
So I represent a school district that, up until real recently, was able to pass bond measures almost every year. So West Fargo, massively growing district, and all that stuff. So but they have massive community support.
Correct.
So they're all able to do it. I think the last one was just too much too soon, and the citizens were like, we're not going to do this anymore. Even though they probably could, because West Fargo is still growing and probably need some more money. So I think it also has to be a lot of community involvement, a lot of discussions to make sure that you get the community rallied around it.
And that right there is the key to it all. Yep. You need to engage with your community and let them know what is going on and where it's going to be used. The biggest problem we have in my small community is, I heard from so-and-so, this is what they're really going to do. It's not. I have added it to my door knocking when I'm door knocking in my community, the bond measure, and there's a lot of back and forth and questions that they have, and I can answer that for them, and they seem it changes their perspective.
Yep. So these discussions that we've been having today, I hope you found them extremely valuable. Maybe just showcasing to you that those who have just different perspectives bring valuable perspectives to the discussion. And throughout all the conversations we've had today, I hope you can see that. And when you're going out to vote this November, I just really hope that when you research your ballot, really take a look at each individual person, look up what they think on these issues, and really just decide whether you have trust in them as a person, as your neighbor, as your friend, as your coworker, and try not to just vote just on the party line, but to really make those considerations on an individual basis. So as we wrap up today, I would just like to invite each of our guests to kind of give their pitch. Why should the voters of your respective constituency go your way? And so we'll go the opposite way we came in. We'll start with District 3 Senate candidate Michael Thiesen. Why should people vote for you?
Communication is like one of the most important things to me. So if I do get elected, which I have all intents and purposes to be elected, communication with my community will be one of the biggest things that I reach for.
Mm-hmm.
Like being on the other end of that, the communication is so key to me, and being able to talk to your constituents. And again, I've said this on the show before, that how can you represent your community if you're not talking to them?
Mm-hmm.
So that is one of the biggest reasons. And yeah, we'll go with that for right now.
All right, that's awesome. So same thing to you, Senator Braunberger. If you're going into November, they're looking at their Secretary of State ballot. Why choose you?
I think election integrity is important. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And also making sure that everybody knows what it takes to vote, what kind of documentation you need. And we need to make sure that there's education piece of that, so you make sure that it is. We also need to have that office. It's not a nonpartisan office, but I think it should be a nonpartisan office.
Yeah.
And that's how I will run that office, as a nonpartisan office, because we need to make sure that we're giving only facts out. We're not giving out opinions, because like Measure 1 that was passed in the primary, which it puts the sole responsibility of determining what goes on the ballot, is the Secretary of State's office. You need somebody there that is going to make sure that they do very critical thinking. And I want to do that I will be the one that can do that critical thinking to ensure that we are respecting the citizens' rights to put things on the ballot. We also need to make sure that there is, when we send out the notification on what a measure is, because that's the responsibility of the Secretary of State's office, that it is neutral. That includes the colors of what we're using on what a yes vote versus no vote, because that can be subliminal on what the office thinks. We need to make sure that that is all very neutral. And I will put people into that office that will challenge me. I will make sure that we use outside resources like the League of Women Voters to ensure neutrality as best as possible.
Fantastic resource.
And then I will use some of my background in social work to identify my biases so that I can counteract them. So that's why I believe I'm the right choice for the Secretary of State's office.
Wonderful.
Your comment on being neutral with the ballot measures is important.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing I lead with every time. I cannot tell you how to vote. I'm here to inform you, and that's it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for the discussion. Again, Michael Thiesen, District 3, Senator Ryan Braunberger for Secretary of State. And thank you to the listeners for tuning in today. We greatly appreciate your time. And thank you again to Beck TV for having us on the program. And we hope that everybody has an amazing evening.